Hey y'all, I'm back with a super simple DIY project life, and this time I'm going to be working with stencils. I'm going to just go ahead and jump right into the process because I did speed this up quite a bit. I'm starting off with some texture paste by Ranger and just my standard Project Life white cardstock. The texture paste that I used was mixed with some refill ink, and it's just a Studio Calico mint ink, and I just dropped a few little drops of the color into the texture paste, and it turned a mint color, of course. And so I'm just starting off by using a simple stencil, and I think that stencils is, most of the stencils I'm using are Studio Calico, with the exception of some. I may use a Tim Holtz stencil, and then a couple of Heidi Swapp stencils, and then I think those are the only brands that I really use. Possibly some Crafters Workshops, and I'll try to point all of those out. But this one's a Studio Calico stencil, and I'm just doing the same technique on both of these cards. I used a 4x6 the first time, and then that was, of course, a 3x4. And then I'm going to wipe off my stencil, and I do take that stencil to warm water like right away. I think I just did that off camera. This time I'm going to try to do kind of an ombre effect, and this stencil, I believe, came in a kit at some point, and I'm not really sure who designed this, but the ink that I'm using is Avery L, and that ink is called Raspberry, and then the Distress paint is Spun Sugar. And as you can see, I just dab it on my little craft sheet, and then I made kind of an in-between color by mixing those two, and I'm just using a Martha Stewart stencil sponge. I really like those, and I just rinse them off when I'm done, and then I reuse them. I'm going to do the same technique with this second one, and the reason I dab the Distress ink onto the craft sheet instead of putting it straight onto the stencil and paper is because it is kind of runny, so it would have gotten underneath the stencil, and in fact, I tried it on a sheet of paper, like I think previously, and it did not work, so that's why I dabbed it onto the craft sheet. That time I just used I think that is a Crafter's Workshop stencil, and I'm sorry, I think that's a Studio Calico stencil actually. And I just used my spray to just spray right onto the paper, and then I'm just going to wipe that off. And so a lot of these like techniques are obviously very simple, what you would typically do. This time I mixed a little bit of Tim Holtz gold ink with some gold paint, and just to get a little bit more consistency, and then I just put it right onto the cardstock. I just used one of those same sponges. So as you can see, I'm using a bunch of different mediums. I'm using pigment ink, which I think works perfect for this. I'm using distress paint. I'm using regular paint, spray ink, with just using the old trick of just spraying right onto it, because I know a lot of us don't really do that anymore. And then let's see, I'm trying to think if I use it. Oh, and I also use distress inks with the sponge dauber or the sponge blender tool thing here in a second. I really love the way this cloud one turned out, so I went ahead and did a couple more of those. And you guys, if you stay tuned for the next video, which should be posted later today, I will show you guys how I use these cards. So my favorite ones are really the ones that I did with the Distress ink, and that's coming up. It is sped up quite a bit because I realize that this is going to get repetitive, like continuing to do this, because you guys, a lot of you know how to do this. The reason why I'm like showing it, because some people may not know how, and some people may not like use all the different kinds of mediums on these, and because I don't know it, because I want to show you how I use them in Project Life. That's a Heidi Swapp stencil, and then this triangle one that I just used was also a Heidi Swapp stencil, and I believe the one that I thought was a Studio Calico stencil earlier, this one right here, I actually think that is a Crafter's Workshop stencil. So I sped that up quite a bit, and then I am using some different distress inks. I'm using Picked Raspberry, Spun Sugar, Worn Lipstick, and then I'm also using Spiced Marmalade, and I think it's like Squeezed Lemonade. And then I'm using picked pistachio or something like that. I think it's like something pistachio. And then I believe I used like evergreen bough on that one. And then this one, of course, I'm using picked raspberry. And then I used warm lipstick there. And then picked raspberry and warm lipstick again. So I love the way that one turned out. So those are obviously my favorite ones out of the whole, I think, collection of the ones that I made, just because I think it was just more controlled and they just turned out a little bit more, I guess, precise. But I do love the way that these turned out. Here come some of the final ones, and then if you stay tuned for the next video, I will show you guys how I use those. So I hope you guys enjoyed this super simple process. Let me know if you have any questions.